Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have three questions I want to dive into. But first, before I dive into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you are sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. There's also at least one or two bottlenecks that we figure out that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. And these are things outside of the training and nutrition protocols as well too. And again, these usually hold people back more than they think. So if you're interested in learning more, you can fill out the link in the show notes, or you can reach out to me on Instagram and we can chat about this in more detail. If you aren't interested in full coaching, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan for the next couple months. And again, that also is in the show notes. And then lastly, if you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, I have my free masterclass on this, and you can find the link to that in the show notes. And I did just recently update that. So there's a few things that have been updated to that. Make sure you go and check that out. If you are somebody who wants to see the updated version, just shoot me a message on Instagram and I will send that over to you. Next, follow me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_, and that's where I'm most active on social media. And then lastly, if you have found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. With that out of the way, let's dive into today's topics. The first question I have is, how did your client's HRV improve? So I posted a picture of my client. So his heart rate variability improved. And what I want to do here is briefly go over what it is. And then I want to talk about how we specifically improved him. I also want to go over how you could potentially use it there with that. So what is HRV, right? So again, as I said, it's heart rate variability. And this is where the amount of time between your heartbeats fluctuates slightly. These variations are very small, adding or subtracting a fraction of seconds between beats. Okay, how does it work? Your heart beats at a specific rate at all times. That rate changes depending on what you're doing at that particular time. Slower heart rates happen when you're resting or relaxed, aka the parasympathetic nervous system, and faster rates happen when you're active, right? Stressed or you're in danger as well too, and that's the sympathetic nervous system. There's variability in your heart rate based on the needs of your body and your respiratory patterns. Also, medications and medical devices such as pacemakers can also affect your heart rate variability. And it also tends to decrease normally as you get older. Whether you're awake or asleep, calm or stressed, your heart has to be able to react to changes in your life and surroundings, but it doesn't know when to react on its own. So it relies on another body system for help. And that's where we have the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches, which I was talking about, right? So again, parasympathetic is your rest and digest. Sympathetic is your fight or flight, essentially. If you think you're in danger, you get scared or startled, or if you're anxious about something, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and starts the fight or flight response. Your body releases adrenaline so you can react faster. Your heart rate goes up just in case your muscles need more blood and oxygen because of the physical activity. And then once the situation that put you into that fight or flight mode is over, then your parasympathetic nervous system takes the lead and it tells your heart rate to slow back down and lowers your blood pressure. It also tells various systems of your body to relax and go back to how they normally work, right? Again, we want to have some time in that parasympathetic, but we also want to have time in that parasympathetic as well too. And why would this be something that we would want to look at? Again, your body has many systems and features that let it adapt to where you are and what you're doing. Your heart's variability reflects how adaptable your body can be. If your heart rate is highly variable, this is usually evidence that your body can adapt to many kinds of changes, right? So we want it. So a higher number would be better here in this situation. People with high heart rate variability are usually less stressed and happier overall. And what we can typically use this for too, it's also a good sign that you're recovered, right? Your body's going to be more adaptable to change, right? So again, the higher the number, the better your body's going to be more sensitive to whatever adaptation you're trying to get, right? Muscle growth, fat loss, whatever it may be. In general, low heart rate variability is considered a sign of current or future health problems because it shows your body is less resilient and struggles to handle changing situations. And it's also more common in people who have higher resting heart rates. So I'll see this. I have clients, and again, typically you'll see high heart rates and then you'll see lower HRVs, right? And then within day to day, you'll see it flip where it's maybe they have a low recovery day or a higher recovery day, and then their resting heart rate goes down. So they do go back and forth. And yeah, when one's higher, the other one's lower. And so that's because when your heart is beating faster, there's less time between beats, reducing the opportunity for variability. And so again, you'll see this in many things like diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety and depression, et cetera. And so again, it can be so really long story short, it can be a great way to show how adaptable your body is at that period of time. So again, when it's lower, you're going to see, again, that's a good sign that you're under recovered. And with this particular client, the reason we track it again is to just see what the recovery is. This particular client, his HRV was a little bit lower. It's come back up. It's come up a little bit. And with him, he was somebody that he wanted to build muscle. He was on the leaner side, training a ton. He's got a couple kids, so his sleep was off. I suspect that he was lean, had some muscle, but he wanted to build more, but and his calorie intake was fairly low. And I suspect that his body just adapted to that kind of lower energy availability state where, again, he wasn't eating a ton of calories. And so, yeah, his body just adapted to that. And one of the main things we worked on was increasing food and trying to get him to add in calories and really put his body in a good position to build muscle. But with his HRV being lower, again, this was probably impacted slightly. And so how did we improve his HRV? So first, like I said, he was under eating calories overall and carbs for the intensity and volume of training he was doing. So I think we need to take that into consideration, right? He was under eating for what he was specifically doing. So it's hard to throw out a number there and think, oh, he was under eating with the amount of activity he had, the amount of training volume he was trying to do. He just wasn't eating enough there for that. So we've increased his calories and more importantly, his carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are great for recovery and obviously they allow you to handle more training volume overall and whatnot there. Those are two levers that we pulled, but they do go hand in hand. So again, it's the carbohydrates can improve recovery, but also he needed some more calories overall. He needed more energy coming in to help with that. And that itself, if you're somebody who's on the leaner side, you're already low calorie, you've maybe been fat loss dieting for a period of time, by increasing your calories and increasing potentially your carbohydrates, depending on where they're at, that can be a way to improve your HRV. Again, if you're lean and dieting down, you're low calorie, you're trying to do a ton of training, that's going to put your body in this low recovery state, right? Your HRV is going to be lower. Now, we could take the flip side here, somebody who's overweight, they eat in a surplus of calories, they don't move very much. That's going to be somebody that they probably are going to have a lower HRV. And for them, getting them into maintenance or a small deficit, dropping some body fat, dropping some weight, getting more active, that would lower their HRV, right? So it just depends on where you're at. Not in every case is increasing your calories going to help with this. Second, and this is going to be across the board, no matter what your body fat levels are, no matter how active you are, it was improving his sleep hygiene and habits. Again, that's going to be a huge thing that's going to improve that HRV, especially if you're getting 5-6 hours a night, poor sleep quality, inconsistent and whatnot. Just to put this point home, I've seen multiple times with clients where they'll have alcohol and then the next day they wake up and that HRV is just freaking low and then resting heart rate's a lot higher. I like using the HRV to show people that how certain things can impact your recovery. Because again, I think sometimes we feel it, but we don't really fully put those two together until you see actual numbers. And then you're like, okay, that's crazy. So improved his sleep hygiene and habits overall. Because again, he's got 2 kids. He's super busy, works a full-time job. So we needed to make sure his sleep was on point, and that made a big dent in improving his HRV. And then number 3 was we're just more strategic on when he pushed training versus just going hard every single session. He was somebody who would just go all out intensity, and there was no like structure or periodization to how hard he was going to push. Again, I think more times than not, you should push pretty hard. You don't want to go in there and go easy. But again, if your sleep is poor, you're not eating enough calories to match with your movement, and you do that for extended periods of time, and then you just push as hard as you can in every single session, again, your body's going to be in more of that sympathetic fight or flight state when your HRV is going to be lower. And so this is where, and again, you could be pushing super hard, you could be restricting your calories like you're told, and then it's like your body's just not adapting and it's just in that low recovery state. So just being more strategic on how often he's pushing hard and what he's pushing hard on, and then also just taking some lighter weeks as well too, and matching those all together, and also just auto-regulating when you're going to push your training session. If you get a poor night's sleep, hey, maybe that's a day where you just dial back a little bit there on that. And so that's how we improved his HRV. Again, those would be the main things that I would work on to improve that. Again, stress management techniques would be another big one as well too, making sure that we're managing our stress in a healthy way and finding better stress management techniques, stress reduction techniques. That would be another way to get that down. But what is context dependent? Like I said, we had somebody who is overweight and they don't move much. For them, they would need to drop some body fat, consume less calories, and get more active, right? Somebody who's lean, is not eating very many calories, for them, increasing their calories, carbohydrates, and potentially moderating their training would be a way to improve their HRV. And with this, I don't have every client track it. If they want to track it, then we certainly do, but it's not mandatory because I still like to go off of feel with the recovery side of things. Again, for some people, if they have a good device, Oura Ring solid, Whoop's pretty solid, Apple Watch does it. I use it. I'm not sold on exactly. I think it really depends on when you take it. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to take these readings with a grain of salt. I know there's apps out there that can do it. I haven't used any. I know Morpheus, which is by Joel Jameson. That's a solid option as well too. It does cost monthly, but I've heard good things on that one. And then also, if it is low, if you start to track it and you see it's low, I wouldn't necessarily stress that. Don't necessarily go and completely change your training. Like, oh, it's low, I feel great, but it's low. Oh, I'm gonna just listen to this and then I'm not going to train hard. Use it to guide your decisions, but don't use it as a end all be all, right? Use some judgment there with it and understand that it could be off. And again, you need to go off of how you feel, and that's going to be the most important thing there. Now, if it continues to be low, that's just a sign that, hey, like I need to look at, okay, do I need to improve my diet? Do I need to sleep more? Am I training too much? I do think it can help you guide those decisions in terms of some extra things that you can work on there. Again, I like to use resting heart rate in combination with this. I think that's another solid metric to track as well too. Once you see that, usually, like I said, you see them work in tandem where when resting heart rate goes up, HRV typically goes down. That's what I've seen from tracking with clients there with that. You can use resting heart rate, and that's a little bit of an easier measurement to use as well. But these are two things that you could potentially use there with that. Just some interesting stuff. If you want to find out more about HRV, Dr. Mike T. Nelson would be the guy to check out his stuff. He has a course on HRV. He has a lot of topics on HRV, or has a lot of content on and around HRV. Definitely check him out. Let me know if you have any questions on this, and let's go into the next question. Can I gaintain forever? So first, what is gaintaining? So I'm going to see if I can pull up the definition here of gaintaining. But gaintaining is basically the act of gaining muscle very slowly while staying very lean, ideally maintaining the same body fat percentage by eating at maintenance calories and lifting very hard. So you guys know that I think people can get away with, they don't necessarily have to go straight into a surplus, right? I think there's a lot of things that we can work on before we have to go into this large surplus. I absolutely think you can gaintain, but he specifically asked, can you gaintain forever? And absolutely you can, right? However, you may be leaving some muscle gain on the table. However, this doesn't mean you won't gain any muscle in the process, right? Look, simply put, people always ask, hey, can I build muscle at maintenance, or do I have to be in a surplus? And you can totally gain muscle in a surplus or at maintenance. However, it is going to be slightly slower, and you're not going to get as much as you would be in a small calorie surplus. So you can do this. It's just going to be slower. And if you're okay with that, then that's your choice, right? If you want to be a little bit leaner, then you can do that. Now, what I'll say on this is the more muscle you have, the leaner you are, the less likely this is to happen. Okay. So if you are, let's take sub 15 to 20% is female, sub 8 to 10% is a male, the chances of you gaintaining, adding muscle in that state, very unlikely. Certain people may be able to do this, but most people aren't going to be able to do that, right? It's just not the optimal condition to build muscle. I actually just recently had Eric Helms on the podcast. I'm going to use this before this episode is out, but he mentioned it's like a farmer, right? Like you're trying to find the best way to grow your crops as best as you can, right? You want to get the right wind, you want to get the right sunlight, the timing, the right amount of, I honestly don't know what goes into it, but it made sense when he said it, right? Seed, whatever you need, fertilizer to grow your crops. And the same thing here with building muscle, right? Like you need to make sure that everything kind of lines up. You need to find the best way to get the best sleep, find the right training volume, right stress management techniques, the right food coming in, the right amount of macros. And with this, like if you're at maintenance, the leaner you are, the tougher and the more muscle you have, the tougher it's going to be able to continue to build muscle at that state, right? But in saying that, if I were to put two and two together, being in a small surplus is going to be better than being at maintenance from a muscle building standpoint. But again, that doesn't mean you're not going to build any muscle at maintenance. Because again, I think a lot of people hear, oh, that's better. Therefore, the worst option means that nothing's going to happen. And that's not the case. You can certainly do that. But yeah, and I personally like the building and cutting cycles. I think it provides some novelty and it gets you looking forward to, hey, I've been cutting. Now I get to go back to increase my calories a little bit. Or, hey, I've been eating in a surplus. Now I get to cut. So it's nice to do that. Again, you can certainly gaintain, but I would imagine that if you had somebody who gaintained and then you had somebody who was in a small surplus, I bet the person who's in the small surplus at times would have more muscle growth. And I think the other big thing to look at is from a mental side of things is by gaintaining, your progress is going to be so slow you might not really notice it either. And from a mental standpoint, that can be very challenging to stay motivated to continue to train, right? So we need to think about that as well too. But again, look at your body fat levels. If you're super lean, you have a lot of muscle, you're likely not going to be able to gaintain. If you're somebody who has moderate body fat, okay amount of muscle to below average, you're likely going to be able to gaintain and build some muscle without having to be in that small surplus there with that. But in saying that, if you gaintain forever, you likely would end up with less muscle than somebody who was in that surplus at periods of time there with that. So do with that what you will. And then the last question I have for today is a thought experiment. If you could pick one chest exercise to do for an entire year, what would it be? So my first thought was, hey, I'm going to pick a incline chest press. And then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, wait a minute. And the biggest reason was there was a study. Let me find the study real quick. Okay, so a 2020 study by Chavez, they looked at three groups, one doing just flat bench, one doing just incline, then one doing a combo of both. And they found that there was no difference in the mid and lower pecs in either groups. However, the group doing only incline bench gained the most muscle in their upper chest. What that means is that you would be able to hit all your entire chest with the incline, right? For overall chest development, because it's going to hit the upper chest, it's going to hit the mid and lower chest just as much as a flat bench and a decline bench, whereas the flat and the decline didn't hit that upper chest as much. So that was my first thought there was upper chest. However, I got to thinking, I'm like, okay, I usually from overall chest standpoint, I like to have an incline, a flat, and a fly variation. The downside is, yes, you're going to hit all those movements in that, or all those areas of the chest in that incline. However, you're missing out on the fly. Brian Borstein actually incorporated this into my training is a fly press hybrid movement, right? So basically what it is, you come down in a fly movement, not exactly entire fly, but in between, get a nice stretch at the bottom, and then you press it back up, right? So it's like a hybrid of a fly and a press. And so I got to thinking, I was like, you know what? I would probably do that. Some like low to medium incline fly press and probably on a cable if I could, right? There with that, because I think you could set it up you could set it up however you would and make sure that it hits your chest as best as you can. That's the one I would do because you get the incline, right? Where we know that's going to hit the upper chest, mid chest, and lower chest. So that takes care of that. And then you're also getting a fly and a press in it. So you're also hitting that variation of a fly, but a press as well too. And so that's why I ultimately decided to go with that. I feel like that's gonna, if I'm just doing one, that's gonna get my most bang for the buck there on that. And yeah, that's why I would go with that one. And hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you understand my thought process on that and why I would go with that one. So that's it for today's episode. I will chat with you guys next time.